Hello, good evening. I'm Beko Pin. I'm joined by my colleague Mara Cepeda. It's been a long day from Pasay City to Batasang Pambansa. A few hours ago, natatapos yung first State of the Nation address of President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. So we're here to give you a quick recap of the SONA and maybe a little bit of the opening of 19th Congress. Although if you want a more detailed overlook of the 19th Congress, you can watch a live that Mara and I did earlier this morning, which was 12 hours ago. So it's been a long day, Mara. Kamusta?
Feels like a lifetime ago. Well, as expected sa Senado, binigyan tayo ng pahapyaw ni Senate President Mig Zubiri on his expectations for the chamber at kung paano niya patatakbuhin yung chamber. And we're not surprised kasi parang yung kanya, he wants the Senate to be vigilant in terms of, checking problematic bills. But when it comes to the priority bills of the President, he wants the Senate to be cooperative. Yeah. And I think that's important to note kasi Mig Zubiri is a Senate President that has successfully formed a supermajority coalition in the Senate.
Yeah.
And so...
it's difficult in a 24
Yes.
Republic.
And so you would expect him that gagamitin niya ito to really shepherd priority bills of the President. But the challenge for Mig Zubiri, of course, is to assert the independence of the Senate because, in the Philippines, where Congress is traditionally dominated by allies of the President, there's always the Senate na we can expect na kumaga last bastion of, fiscalizing and stopping the passage of controversial bills. And so that's something that we are hoping Senate President Mig Zubiri will be able to meet. But it is a challenge because, we really just can't ignore the fact that he openly campaigned for the President. And my point din naman yung critics when they are, raising concerns about the formation of a supermajority in the Senate. And very intense yung supermajority dito dahil 24 lang sila, 20 sa kanila ay supermajority. Dadalawa lang ang minority bloc, si Senator Risa Hontiveros and our new Senate Minority Leader Coco Pimentel. And the Cayetanos, Pia Cayetano and Alan Peter, independent, neither majority, neither minority, pero that's a play of these veteran politician siblings na gagamitin yung boto nila. So the challenge for Mig Zubiri is really to be fair and to strike that balance between, I guess, being a good ally of the President and being a good senator of the people.
Yeah. Siguro in contrast naman sa House, mas overt yung concerns of a supermajority, especially because there are filial relations to consider in the House of Representatives. But I found it interesting na kanina naman, imbis na iwasan or i-pretend na walang potential conflicts of interest because of family relations head-on. In fact, it was Representative Sandro Marcos. He's a first-time legislator. He is also the son of the President. It was he who nominated his uncle, Representative Martin Romualdez. Small trivia, the three of them are all named Ferdinand.
Sabi nga ng article mo, abundance of Ferdinands.
Yeah. So I found it interesting na they didn't skirt around the issue that they are relatives. In fact, binanggit din ni Representative Sandro Marcos outright, di ba, na issue about family relationships. But although you have to paint it there, you have to highlight also na yes, he is the uncle of Sandro Marcos and a cousin to the President. But ang laki ng role ni Martin Romualdez in the 2022 campaign, forming the unity team pa lang, campaigning for the unity team. He was a co-campaign manager for Sara Duterte. So that's the lay of the land so far sa 19th Congress.
Pero maganda yung dynamics ni Martin Romualdez. Can I just say? Kasi parang yung kanyang background ay parang unity team in a way. He is a Romualdez and then he's part of Lakas CMD, which is the party na of Sara Duterte. So kumbaga, this is really the perfect time for him to be House Speaker, and we know kasi it's really been a struggle for him in the previous Congress. So if there's someone probably who would try to stabilize, relations between the President and the Vice President, it's gonna be Martin.
I mean, a lot of observers, some would say critics, have been mentioning, di ba, na parang yung some call it a fragile alliance between the unity team, and that doesn't speak so much of the characters per se, but siguro just the sheer amount of power between that is with this alliance and that this alliance has to share among very big name politicians, right? Parang kumbaga yung unity team dito hindi lang siya catchphrase, pero if you look at it, consolidation talaga siya ng traditional political power in the Philippines. You can interpret that any way you want to. But yes, that's a good observation. Nga na Martin Romualdez, it's right in the middle of all of it. Cousin to the president, uncle and former boss of Representative Sandro Marcos, and co-campaign manager of Sara Duterte. So it'll be interesting how he'll shepherd the 19th Congress. Kasi kanina nga naman sa SONA, parang in-unveil na ni President Marcos yung the priority of his administration, and specifically yung 19 priority bills niya. Pero siguro before we go to the priority bills, Mara, let's talk about his speech itself, no? In a way, it was very safe, very expected. Walang pasabog, walang tawag nito, walang plot twist.
Walang controversial even and you know, we were talking before we went live, diba? The president stuck to his three primary topics and three priorities, and these are
you have the economy. Siyempre, first cabinet meeting, nag-economic briefing kaagad, although the economic team tried to parang not really unveil agad the economic plan of the Marcos administration, but more or less yun na din pala yun yung numbers na inilahad ni Secretary Jokno before it was mentioned again in the SONA. And another priority jumping off from the first cabinet meeting is the return to face-to-face classes. Of course, that will be headed by Vice President Sara Duterte. Malaking, I don't want to say burden, but that's a huge challenge. And of course, syempre hindi naman si Sara Duterte lang ang kumbaga under pressure, but Marcos himself has a lot of responsibility, not just as president, but as agriculture chief. Because that's another one of his priorities, yung food security nga. And if you notice, if you read through or watch the SONA again, yung dalawang yun, yung tatlong yun rather, yun talaga took the most time, no? In him explaining his priority legislation or his kumbaga roadmap for the Philippines in his administration.
You know, President Marcos also got, I think it bears pointing out that President Marcos, may nagbo-birthday dito, happy birthday sa kanya. Si President Marcos ay nagkaroon ng dalawang standing ovation sa kasagsagan niya kanyang speech. And these are the times when he mentioned really populist, pro-poor policies that really will stick to the gut issues, that even lawmakers who stood up for him will really benefit their constituents and in return will benefit them. Siyempre yung una, yung gusto ni Marcos na i-replicate yung mga specialty hospitals like the Philippine
Heart
Center, Cancer Institute across the country. And you know, this is something that sana matuloy. Because, you know, especially in rural areas, if you get sick with cancer, for example, and you do not get the proper treatment right away that's very available, for example, in Metro Manila, you're going to be having trouble combating that disease. And when you hear it straight from the president, diba, matutuwa ka talaga na, oh my God, mas matutulungan na yung kamag-anak ko na may sakit. And of course, this is going to be good for our congressmen and our congresswomen and our senators who, of course, sila yung directly na magi-implement nito. Probably they will be the ones to be lobbying for the budget of that. Diba? So ripe yung SONA ni President Marcos with policies like this, policy proposals like this. But I think the challenge is how is he going to implement? I think what he did not really mention consistently in the SONA is how he's going to finance all of these promises. So these are very good promises. We want these good programs to be implemented. But it's one thing to make promises and another to actually get the budget for it and actually implement it. Now, the second one na pinalakpakan talaga si President Marcos was his promise to protect the sovereignty of the Philippines. I think you have it in your notes, yung kanyang exact quotes.
I think without bias, I'd have to say kung rhetorics lang in the speech, that was one of the more powerful portions of his speech earlier. No, siguro I'll quote parts of it. This was specifically about foreign policy. He said on the area of foreign... Happy birthday din po. He said on the area of foreign policy, I will not preside over any process that will abandon even a square inch of territory of the Republic of the Philippines to any foreign power. And then he ended that portion of his SONA with, but let me be clear, we are very jealous of all that is Filipino. Sa mga na-confuse ko, ibig sabihin na he means to say na anything that is Filipino is ours to keep. Parang ganun yun. But again, in between that naman, in-emphasize siya ulit, he's mentioned this before, that our foreign policy is to be independent, and that we want to be the friend of all, enemy to
Yes.
none, which is actually an extension of the Duterte
Actually.
foreign policy or parang ideology when it comes to foreign policy.
But harking back to Duterte, we hope that President Marcos will be truthful to his words and actually protect our interests, especially in the West Philippine Sea that is still being claimed by China na we know ay malapit din kay President Marcos. And so, if he does stick to his promise to protect our interests, including in the West Philippine Sea, everyone would benefit, diba? That's always the best way to counter his critics. But let's go to his priority bills. I've covered Congress under Duterte past 6 years, and many of the priority measures cited by President Marcos actually isn't new eh. But the thing, pag sabihin, paulit-ulit siyang minimension ni Duterte, and the reason why these bills were not passed is because Duterte wasn't actively lobbying for it. Halimbawa, National Land Use Act, Department of Water. Nung nagkaroon ng pandemic, Duterte included the creation of the Virology Institute at yung parang ating CDC version yung nasa United States. But ang problema, kahit minimension ni Duterte yun sa kanyang SONA, hindi niya ito nilalobby, so hindi rin napaprioritize ng mga lawmakers.
I have a question muna kasi baka our viewers are wondering, di ba separate branches of government, si legislative tsaka si executive? What do you mean when you say that the president needs to lobby for this? Parang, hindi ba yung encroachment ng powers?
Okay. So basic into our system of government, may tatlo tayong independent but co-equal branches, executive, legislative, and judiciary. So meron silang systems of checks and balances. So we expect na they will be checking on each other's policy proposals. So the president, of course, will lay down, us as our president, will lay down his vision for the country. And para maisakatuparan yung mga vision na yon, kailangan niyang ipasa yung mga certain na batas. Kaya kasi, if you're the president, you want to have allies in Congress. Pero kasi ang hinahanap natin sa mga politiko natin ay delikadesa ba? Na kahit kaalyado ka ng Pangulo, pagka hindi maganda yung...
Hindi ka yes man.
Yes, but in the peculiarity of Philippine politics, madalas yung mga staunch allies kasi ng Pangulo, usually they would blindly defend eh. So again, challenge for the Marcos allies-dominated Congress is to really be able to shepherd the good bills, but at the same time, make sure na hindi malulusot yung mga controversial provisions that, for example, would trample on the human rights, the privacy of ordinary citizens, or walang provision doon na magagamit to, as a tool to fight critics or to stifle critics.
Yeah. Speaking of human rights, I think our colleague Lian Buwan has actually done a report na there was no mention of human rights during the SONA. Another thing that he did not mention, sorry, we're just jumping off, parang side story muna tayo from the 19 priority bills. Wala ring banggit sa Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. That is a very sensitive and urgent issue because we are still transitioning from the ARM to the BARM. So maybe in the next few days we'll be able to talk to legislators and elected leaders from BARM to see kung ano, where is BARM now, right?
And
that's a top of mind issue now.
No mention as well of anti-corruption measures, justice and the rule of law.
Yeah.
Nothing about the drug war and the extrajudicial killings, and even the peace process with the left. And that only tells us one thing: these aren't priorities of the president.
Yeah.
Of course, advocates of these issues are going to be up in arms in the next, but that's just really the reality. Kaya hindi niya minention, hindi niya prioridad. And of course, that's to the detriment of the people in those sectors.
Yeah. Earlier sa panel, someone asked me, I think it was Leloy Claudio who asked me about charter change. It wasn't mentioned at all also.
Oh yes, so that means it's also not a priority. And this is consistent with an earlier statement of Senate President Mig Zubiri na even if there are already different proposals to amend the Constitution, anywhere from federalism to something as simple as, well, it's not simple, but just a little bit part of the Constitution na extending the term or changing the terms in office of the President and the Vice President and the other elected officials. Hindi talaga ito priority. Dahil si Marcos would rather focus on the economy, helping us survive and the pandemic and help our our children adjust again to face-to-face classes, and kaya these issues wala talaga, not even charter change.
At nabanggit mo nga, Mara, siguro yung popular na policies is yung spending ng government. Popular yon.
Yes.
Not so popular, where will we find funding for that spending? In talking about challenges, the president did propose at least 2 tax packages.
Yes.
Part of his priority legislation. So, understandably, that will also take up a lot of political capital.
Yes.
Kasi parang just to expound on what Mara said earlier about the dynamics of the different branches of government, parang when Congress resists, that's when negotiations happen. And that's when the executive, the president, and his allies and other officials will be basically spending their political capital in order to bargain with other legislators. Ideally, kahit na yung kaalyado mo, parang may negotiations pa rin na mangyayari. So,
siguro pinaka-controversial na dun sa 19 bills na mention ni President Marcos is the mandatory ROTC bill. And, I've covered past hearings in the House where they try to revive it. And it's always an issue between showing your love for country and teaching discipline to students and human rights, because there have been a lot of cases of abuse in past ROTC
in fact, that's why it stopped being mandatory.
And so, again, parang may mention yung ating co-reporter si Leah na hindi na nga mention yung human rights. Magdadagdag ka pa ng dimension na possible human rights issue itong dinadagdag niya. But I think the ROTC bill has a better chance of passing just because, lawmakers will probably refile it again. Plus, this is an advocacy of Vice President Sara Duterte, right? It's one of those clear campaign promises that she made in the 2022 elections.
In fact, mas dramatic pa yung gusto niyang i-propose. She initially wanted to push for mandatory military service. Iba pa yun. Ibang-iba yun sa mandatory ROTC.
So baka mas madaling mai-push yun given the political capital of Sara.
I don't know if you share this observation, pero for a while, it seemed like it was info overload, no, yung SONA. But I guess it also makes sense kung bakit ganun. Kasi yun nga, parang the uniteam tandem of now President Marcos and Vice President Duterte, they didn't really go into policy, they didn't dive into policy during the campaign, right? Kumbaga, it really was a campaign that was built on the promise of unity, and that's not shade, that's not a criticism per se, but it's just a statement of fact na parang towards the end, nag-release sila ng platform, but it wasn't really a detailed platform in the form of videos lang yun. So it was quite understandable na medyo ngayon sa SONA, kasi ngayon na nga in-unveil yung parang
the grand plan, yes,
marching orders.
At hindi lang siya Congress, across different government agencies, diba? And so I guess what you can expect from Rappler in the coming days ay talagang hihimayin namin yung mga marching orders ni President Marcos, and we'll try to explain to you the implications of these policies.
Definitely.
Are they feasible? I mean, you've started doing this already, but we have more work ahead of us. And it's always good to be able to be given plans, because that's what we really want anyway, right?
It's a lot to unpack siguro, and like Mara said, in the coming days, expect a lot of reports and analysis from Rappler. I guess we should end there.
Yes.
Kasi baka umabot tayo sa haba ng SONA, which was mga around 1 hour and 14.
Kind of a breath of fresh air after 6 years of Duterte.
A fairly succinct na SONA. So, I guess that's it for us here at the Batasang Pambansa.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you for watching. Ang haba nun. Ilang minutes yun?